said anything that's upsetting
I
our
think you did.
broker. And for those of you who are on Facebook and watching this us via camera, that is Duane
Hey.
Fouts. He took that out. That's actually, he wore that in high school and college. So
No, this is how I looked many, many years ago. Not really.
all right, Duane, we'll appreciate you joining
You
us.
bet.
And you sent us a list of topics you wanted to talk about.
Yep.
So let's talk about the Realtor Safety Alert Program.
Yeah. This is one that I wanted to bring forward because.
I guess I just copied and pasted. So you were wanting me to download the flyer.
There you go. Yeah. Nice job, Mike.
Sorry, guys, you can't click on the link that's on your computer screens. I'll try to get them to you in the chat. It's like sitting my brother's kids or something.
But this is a very important topic that we need to be paying attention to whenever we're out in the marketplace with our clients, buyers or sellers. Unfortunately, what brought this one to mind to me was we had not our office, but our realtor family had a realtor in Tucson attacked at an open house. The suspect is still on the loose, as far as I know. It's unknown exactly which direction or where he's went, but we think he's probably headed north someplace, so it could very well be in our market. And so, whenever you're doing those activities, open houses in particular, but any kind of activity that you haven't met the clients yet, you don't have any idea. First of all, there's forewarn out there, right?
Yeah.
That we as a firm offer for our agents, and if you want more information about that, we can certainly get that to you.
Email tech support at West USA, and they can get you set up ASAP.
You bet, and that's a great product for us and our safety. The Arizona Association of Realtors also has this Realtor Safety Alert Program. There's lots of information on their aaronline.com for you. I've got a couple of links up there for you as well. You can also report incidences if you ever feel like you've been in an unsafe scenario, unsafe position. There's a link there for you to report that to the folks at AAR.
One of the questions that often comes up, and boy, I'm going to open up a can of worms here.
I know.
Is because agents go kind of back and forth and debate this. Appropriate or not appropriate for an agent to at least have somewhere in their possession at an open house some sort of firearm for protection?
That is a difficult, it is very difficult. In my mind, properly trained, it's okay, but I don't like the idea of that, having them there, because at the end of the day, I don't know. To me, I would prefer to have the spray, and stuff like that. Who knows, how an incident's going to play out and whether a firearm would be appropriate or not. But typically, a non-lethal, I think, would be a much better solution.
And I would also think that there would have to be. I mean, a lot of sellers, I think, would be really upset if they didn't know you had a firearm and then learned that you had a firearm.
Yeah.
So I would say, if at the very least, if you feel like that's what you want to do, you should probably run it by the homeowner.
And yeah, absolutely, and use some common sense, no doubt about it. And take somebody with you as well. Don't be going to these open houses and doing them on your own. It's just not a safe way to conduct those.
Sorry, Todd, we're about to roll out a class. Anthony Cucci with HCP Home Inspections has been working with a couple of different industry partners on putting together a safety class,
Perfect.
Making sure that your environment is safe for open houses. If you are still putting people in your cars, what to do there. And then the delay is we're working on a discount for West USA agents when it comes to purchasing tasers and non-lethal protection devices. So we'll hopefully have that done in the next week or two. We were working on the class for a while, but once that attack happened in Tucson, we kind of ramped up getting that out there.
And just a quick thing on this is just that, whatever your form, I always believe that personal protection, you being able physically to be able to learn how to use your body and other people's bodies against them, this is always your first line of protection. And so I would recommend that if you're worried about this and you're not going out there and taking these special hand combat classes, then you have to kind of look in the mirror. You're setting setting yourself up to be a victim. We don't want victims. We want to help protect you, whether it's a firearm, or it's mace, or it's a pin or a pen, or your ability to use anything that's in a home and know how to protect yourself. That would be my recommendation.
Well, I am my slogan, my mantra is I'm a lover, not a fighter. So, all right. So inappropriate language in the MLS public remarks. I see the word inappropriate language, and I have a whole
yeah, I know. You go.
idea
You go.
of where we're going with this. What's inappropriate? Because I think people are starting to get fined. There
Yes.
are some things we don't pay attention to changes.
Correct.
Oftentimes, and I know Armless does a pretty good job at giving us warnings.
They do.
But what are some of our common inappropriate language that we are including?
So our firm is members of all 10 MLSs in the state, and so as a broker, I get notification whenever there's violations committed by one of our agents, and each MLS has its own set of rules, its own set of guidelines, and how they address that. I put this up here because this primarily happens in the AR MLS data set, and the biggest one is putting in the public remarks, hey, I'm having an open house Saturday 9 to 1. That's not allowed. That's $200. Okay. And Armless does give you the opportunity for one violation a year with no penalty. After that, it's in this case, it's $200 to fine. Remember that the Rules Committee, who Susan Herber is also the chair of this year, changed the inappropriate language policy recently to try to address some of the stuff that was going in there. You cannot have any contact information in there about how to reach out to the listing agent or the listing broker. Those are inappropriate and do not belong there. The basic thing to remember, that public remarks area is only for attributes of the property. Okay. And so you want to make sure that when you're putting that listing into the MLS, you're not violating any of that. And you can go to armls.com, and right on there is a link to all of their rules, and you can just type in inappropriate language and you can see that.
What if, because I see this a lot, is what if the seller is offering some sort of seller concessions? Is that appropriate or okay in the public remarks?
One of those is kind of on the edge, and right now I believe they are allowing that. And by the way, understand that ARMLS has an automatic checker that are checking these listings, every new one that comes in, and then if it throws a red flag, there's a person that goes and looks at it. So, so you can try it, but you're probably not going to get away with it for long. But right now, I think that is considered an attribute of the property, and you can market it.
Yeah, and from a open house, Mike, they just have to know enough to go in and mark it as an open house. So you can still accomplish the same thing without changing the language.
And it's searchable that way, and it gets syndicated as well. So that's a very good positive thing.
All right, so it's been years since I've gotten a nasty gram from Armless.
You better start knocking,
Come on,
man.
Mikey. Now I'm going to start looking at your stuff.
Are you kidding me? It's because I have a transaction coordinator.
Oh.
She's amazing, right? That's why you have a TC.
Yeah, that sure helps, no doubt.
All right, let's talk. This is we could spend probably all morning on this.
Yes, sir.
I am now getting a lot more calls on my listings right now from not only investors but from other agents saying that will your seller entertain some sort of seller financing option, whether it's a lease purchase, a wrap, or something like that.
Right. Yep. And I think we're going to see quite a bit of that as our market goes forward. And the reason, quite honestly, is those attractive rates that sellers have on their existing first mortgage, right? And I can't say as I blame folks for that. It's certainly a way to acquire a property that would be advantageous. But on the other hand, there's a lot that goes into those things, and we're just not really good at most of that language it would require for any of these.
We being realtors.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
These are legal perspectives.
Exactly.
This isn't a West USA thing. This is an industry issue.
That's exactly correct. And you're You're going to see these offers come across if you're a listing agent. And if you're a buyer's agent, you're going to have buyers ask you about them. And so I wanted to talk about them today. First of all, let's start with wraps. Everybody should know what a wrap is, but in case they don't, essentially it's where the seller finances the purchase of the property by including a seller in the seller financing the underlying existing loan. Those are a type of transaction that West USA does not participate in. We don't want you as an agent or our client participating in them. Why? Any idea?
Due on sale clauses?
Hey, every one of those underlying loans is going to have a due on sale clause, which means when that deed transfers, that loan's got to be paid off. And if you in a wrap scenario, that underlying loan is never paid off. It's included in the seller financing. And that is a problem waiting to happen down the road. What's the remedy? That underlying lender, when they find out that loan has been or that property has been transferred, they can trigger full payment, acceleration, full payment of that thing within 30 days. How many folks do you know that can write a check for the balance of their loan within 30 days?
Well, Nick can. He's the EVP here at West USA. He's just bathing in money.
But anyway, so wraps, we don't want to do that. If you want to get more in depth to that, I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. Options, again, this is a very specialized area of real estate. Basically gives a purchaser the right to purchase a property at a certain time in the future. Again, there's lots of documents out there you can find with those, but don't invoke using any of those without talking to one of us.
Well, I would also say too, I mean, you don't want to enter into anything like this without ensuring that you got a real estate attorney, that your buyer has a real estate attorney, because I mean,
no. And the subject to, it's similar to a wrap, only it's not. There's no seller financing involved. This is where the buyer would come in with the equity on the property, and then take over the payments of the existing underlying loan. Again, that's still going to be a violation more than likely of the due on sale clause, and you're going to have a problem. I can tell you that this came to my attention when I found out that we have agents out there that are on behalf of investors putting out, let's just say, way too many of these subject to proposals. Letters of intent, they use letters of intent rather than a contract, which is a whole other issue. But subject to is a problem waiting to happen as well. It's very similar to a wrap. Seller financing, I have no problem with seller financing as long as it's in compliance with the Dodd-Frank. We have the forms for that in AAR. And if sellers are willing to do that, as long as our
okay, so then, I mean, I guess I haven't taken a look at these seller financing forms. And I know, Todd, you and I, we've had some lengthy conversations about this, but what really at the end of the day is the difference between seller financing and a wrap? I mean, as far as like, is one better than the other outside of triggering the due on sale clause?
Yeah, so let's assume that this seller owns this property free and clear, right?
Oh, okay, seller free and clear. Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, so there's no underlying loan.
I got
you. Now the buyer will pay a down payment, and then the seller would calendar.
Yeah, and in some instances, which isn't up here, but some people might be misunderstanding the word assumption. An assumption is when you qualify to take over the seller's existing loan. So there's no problem with the lender. You become the new borrower from the lender, and now you're subject to the due on sale in your future. Seller financing, you could do an assumption of a say you've got a $750,000 house and you got a $500,000 mortgage, but there's an amount of money more than the 10% down or 15 or 20% down that the buyer has to bring in. So the seller could finance that small difference between the mortgage balance and the down payment. But again, according to Dodd-Frank, and Dodd-Frank made some really crazy things. Like depends on how many properties you own. It depends on whether you've given one before. Are you having to, you have to use the standard underwriting terms with someone who does underwriting to be able to verify the buyer has. It's so much most sellers just don't want to do it.
Yeah, very true. But yet they are a legitimate way of acquiring property. And So yeah, we can do those. Just know that there are those Dodd-Frank rules that we have to comply with. When you get into a transaction desk looking at the forms, there's 3 different seller financing forms. Make sure you're using the right one. Make sure you're doing that. And if you have questions about it, obviously us brokers can help you with that. The last one is lease purchase. I can tell you that that's another popular thing at times. There are some companies here in town that we have partnered with at West USA that I think do some pretty good jobs of that. I will also tell you that a lease purchase is the largest lawsuit that I've ever been in as a broker.
Ditto.
Yeah, they can be very problematic. So if you have somebody wanting to sell or buy under a lease purchase, and lease purchase and lease option are 2 different things as well, they need legal advice. We should not be drafting those agreements, right? So these are, oops.
Just kidding.
Thanks, Mike.
So then, okay, so then on a lease purchase or a lease option, I mean, my understanding and my experience way back goes, I mean, I did a lot of lease purchases back in the day.
Mhm.
So very fluent on lease purchases, more so than I am on wraps. And so is there a difference between the two as far as triggering a due on sale clause, or is doing a lease purchase or a lease option, you still run the same risk?
No, with a lease purchase, you would not run that same risk.
Because the deed doesn't transfer.
The deed does not transfer. The owner,
It's contingent.
the owner becomes a landlord essentially, and then at some point in the future, the borrower has the opportunity to purchase the property. Lease purchase, they have an obligation is actually to purchase the property. A lease option, they have the right to do that. Yeah, and so there are a lot of nuances to all of this stuff, and it's very technical. And so if you get to any of this stuff, happy to have conversations with you, because it's not for the weak of mind. I can tell you that.
They're just the most highly litigious aspects.
Yes, very much so. And in a worst case scenario, not even in a worst case scenario, they're problematic waiting to happen. So, and the biggest thing I wanted to come out of this conversation is we do not do wraps. We just will not do them. They're just too much of a risk there.
Well, you and I should probably be eating a few more wraps in our diet, right?
We're always good for that.
All right, so we had Matt on. We talked. I mean, I don't think we need to really rehash this about the mortgage rate buy down seller concessions. My question to you, and I think Matt answered the question
perfectly.
Perfectly was just: is there specific language that we need to include on page 8 in reference to rate buy downs and so forth? And according to Matt, the answer is really no. You just say, hey, X amount of dollars, seller, X amount of dollars from seller concessions, and then the buyer and the lender are going to determine where that money's go and how they're going to do it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Matt brought forward there. I think from a seller perspective, if you're giving concessions to a borrower, to a buyer, figure that money being spent. There was a time when we had in our contract that the concessions could only be used for certain things and whatnot, and it got into arguments. Up to and so forth. And it's so from a seller perspective, I think you just if you're going to agree to a $9,000 concession, that money is going to be used for however the lender and the borrower choose to use it. And I think that from a buyer's perspective, that's a good thing for them, because the buyer now has the ability to make those decisions that Matt was talking about and do some calculations. And I think that's very important.
We've even seen it where lenders have used that money to pay off a buyer's debt.
Right.
That helps the buyer qualify for the next tier.
Yeah. So there are a lot of benefits, I think, to allowing that.
Well, and then I think to Matt's point is you just got to know what the maximum allowable concession is, and for conventional, he said 3%. So it doesn't do you any good to do 4%.
Well, actually, that's a good point, Mike. When you and I were doing these many years ago, you probably remember that if the person paid 1% over what the maximum seller contribution was, the buyer had to match it in their down payment. So it's possible that you can save the buyer 1% down and the seller 1% down by not exceeding the maximum contribution.
All right, earnest money demand.
Yeah.
One of my favorite topics,
This isn't
because
litigious.
it's sometimes I'm left scratching my head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I brought this forward because this is something that I see happen, and I think it's here for a caution, right? As a seller's agent in particular, um, there is some statutes in Arizona about the amount of damages that a seller in a real estate transaction can um, retain, right? So if they're damaged, and what the reason I want to bring this up is it's very common for us as agents representing sellers that when a buyer breaches a contract, we make a demand to the escrow for the earnest money, right? Well, that can be problematic, and we probably shouldn't be doing that as agents, okay, of the seller. The reason is when that demand is made, that caps the amount of damages that the seller can go after. And think about today's market, okay? You're in a contract for $500,000, $500,000, right? And the buyer breaches just before close of escrow, okay? And they've got $10,000 of earnest money up, okay? First thing that you oftentimes will think is, let's make a demand for that earnest money because the buyer breached. That may not be the best thing to do. Reason is, the damages are likely going to exceed the $10,000 of earnest money that the seller has, or could very easily do that. And there are some legal remedies that the seller may have per the terms of the contract, right? That
Civilly.
that are civil.
Okay, well, in this situation, so really, before you allow your seller to demand earnest money, you need to have a conversation with them about what is the long-term intent. What's the goal here? So let's say they do a demand for earnest money, and the title company says no, earnest money is going back to the buyer.
Okay.
Seller, you lose. Now, is the seller still capped at the amount of damages they can go after?
No, they didn't collect them.
That's probably going to be a conversation with your attorney or the buyer or seller's attorney. I don't know the answer to that one.
Yep.
My guess is that it may have some. It will certainly be an argument.
Yeah.
I can tell you that in front of a judge. I think the more appropriate position for us as listing agents to take is, seller, before you make a demand or advise me to make a demand on your behalf to the escrow company for that earnest money, you should be talking to your attorney. Because think of that $500,000 property. They may sell it for $475 because they couldn't get a buyer at $500 now, right? Plus, they've got carrying costs from the scheduled close of escrow. They've got maintenance. They've got a lot of other potential damages in there. So they could easily come up to $50,000 of damages. And so that might be a better remedy for your seller than it would be to collect the $10,000 and move forward.
Look under this paragraph called breach in the purchase contract.
Right. Yep.
And it basically says, in the event of a buyer breach, the seller may, at the seller's as the seller's option, retain the earnest money as the seller's sole right to damages. If you accept that earnest money, you can't go civil. But if you don't take that earnest money, you may have additional options, talk to an attorney, blah,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah.
Exactly.
But that same thing, if you have $60,000 in earnest money, and you want to take the $60,000, and the seller's happy taking the $60,000, that may be too much money if the seller doesn't really have $60,000 or potentially $60,000 worth of damages, to Duane's point. So you can't accept more than the damages that you're going to have. That's the whole purpose. You can't go to court and have a court case if you don't have damages. So just something to take into consideration. Just because that's why Duane and I always say the amount of earnest money, just because an offer has significantly higher earnest money doesn't make it necessarily a better offer.
Not always.
Not always.
So I guess the reason like I said when I started this thing, the reason I brought this up is I want our agents to be aware that there are some ramifications to making demands for earnest money. They need to understand those, and they need to have conversations with their clients about those, especially when you're on the seller side.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And the buyer side, similar thing, right? Because they have to know when they're breaching the contract, their damages may not be limited to just the earnest money. A lot of times we've seen buyers just say, well, I'll just forfeit my earnest money and walk away. Well, may not go that way. I will tell you, most of the time it does, but when it doesn't, it's going to hurt. It's
All right.
probably going to hurt. Okay.
All right, realtors inspiring service excellence. I would like to think that I should be winning some sort of award every year because I'm just about as inspiring as it gets. Don't look at me like that, Nick. I am the wind beneath your wings, pal.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. So this is I wanted to end on this one because I think it's awesome that our association is bringing this forward, and I'm very proud to say that initially we've had 2 of our agents get nominated and receive this award. I wanted to point them out. Jennifer Abrahamson, she was nominated, believe it or not, by a broker from another company.
Wow.
And very proud. It says Jennifer is one amazing lady. Not only does she go above and beyond in her education so that she can be the best care for her clients, but she also takes other agents under her wing and helps them grow their business. Jennifer, truly a selfless person. That's awesome to get that kind of
What a leader is.
Yep. And the second one we got was Mary Thune. She was nominated by another fellow realtor from a different company. He said, I recently did a sale with Mary, and she was a joy to work with. Her professionalism throughout the transaction was refreshing, change of pace. What most impressed me was she worked with and represented her client. She went above and beyond as an agent and as a human being to help her client with the emotional move, and I was incredibly impressed by Mary's throughout the entire process. And so as a broker, what I see a lot is the agents that are going at each other's throat, right? And their clients are going at each other's throat. And I like to think that we could be better at how we handle these emotional transactions. In this RISE program, I wanted to bring it forward so that if you have somebody that you do a cross sale with, that you
gotta get into the mic.
I got to get into it like that. If you have somebody that you do a cross sale with and you want to acknowledge them, send them into the RISE program honor roll and see if you can get them nominated.
Right, so I'll have Ryan nominate me, and I'll nominate Ryan.
I assume there's a vetting process there, Mike.
there is.
Remember, it said selfless. What was that word? That was
So we've had a lot of agents reaching out, asking specific questions about specific situations. So anytime you have a question about a transaction you're in, or if you want to just bounce an idea off a broker, please feel free to reach out to our broker staff. They're available, not 24/7, but almost.
Pretty close. Yeah. 602-942-4200.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate it, Duane. Great stuff.
Awesome.
We're gonna have Kyle on next week. Anything we can heckle him about? Any good stories?
Maybe, but I'm not going to share.
Okay. All right, we leave you with the quote of the day. Just because I cannot see it doesn't mean I can't believe it.
Amen.
Appreciate everybody joining us today. Go out and sell a home.